Welcome back to Norfolk Notables. I'm Anne-Marie Battistone, and you're watching NCTV. My guest today is Kyle Hooper. He was among the finalists for a very, very big competition, a painting competition run by British Petroleum. He went to London to participate at the final showing, and so he's here with me today. He lives right here in Norfolk. Oh, thank you for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Now, we have some here to look at, but tell me first what you were telling me before the show. How this happened to occur? How this all happened?
So the BP Portrait Award is put on every year. It's sponsored by British Petroleum. It's through the National Portrait Gallery in London.
Oh, okay. Oh.
So it's an open sort of call where you enter a portrait. It goes through an initial judging panel, and from that they comprise, let's say, 100, 200, 300 people. You send the actual work over to London where it goes through a second round of judging, and from that they break it down into what the actual show will be. And I was fortunate to be one of the, I believe it's 45.
Out of 2,500?
Out of, just over that, from about, I think they had entries from about 84 countries.
Oh,
so.
Gee, what an honor. Now tell me about, because I had asked you earlier if you were not nervous about sending the original out like that. And you said there was a special service.
Well, I mean, there's lots of different, I guess, art handling companies and couriers. I mean, you wouldn't just want to trust it with, I'm not going to say companies' names, but the company I actually used, which I had a very good experience with, is Flight One. I'm not allowed to say that. Flight One Logistics. They're out of London, but so essentially, they come to the house directly. They pick the thing up, goes on the Concorde. Gets a better flight than I do over there. And
so they don't use their own planes. They have seats, or they have a space on that. On
it's whatever flight goes over. I guess I don't know the hyper specifics of it, but it goes on the plane, goes over there. Courier picks it up, brings it back to the facility, and then on whatever specified day, it's delivered to the actual venue. And then the art handlers at the museum take care of it from there.
Do they box it for you as well? They must.
No, that's
you do it yourself.
Crate and pack everything myself. So,
what's involved? I've often wondered what's involved in creating a painting.
It depends. So you can actually
build a little stage for it in the box so that it sits on.
Yeah, I mean, essentially you're making. There's multiple versions. The basic one would be a plywood crate. Have some sort of a foam or inner lining, maybe wrap it in like a heavy mill plastic, so water or elements don't affect it.
And of course it has to be custom made to fit the painting, obviously.
Correct. I used something which is sort of encased in a foam, and then it's in like a melamine encased sort of heavy cardboard, which is puncture resistant. It's very lightweight, so that saves you on shipping aspects. It's a good sort of option.
Right.
Wood's obviously heavy. Depending on the size of what you're shipping to, that affects what. And
you had to cover that shipping over and back, and didn't you?
The back.
But except they kept it there for the exhibit, obviously.
Correct, which is there's a gamble in that you're sending over the pond, and then you have to pay for it to come back immediately. But the outcome, if you can get in, is huge.
Oh yes.
So
now you don't make a living painting.
I don't.
Well, what do you do? What is the day job?
Construction. Yeah.
And so when did you? But you did go to art school.
I did.
And then why? So did you go to construction for precisely to have a day job and continue with?
I've just always worked construction. That's my family's always been in construction, so was just a natural thing that I grew up around that I've always just done. I do a lot of finish carpentry. I do a lot of paint and plaster.
Huh. My dad was a plasterer.
Plastering's tricky. You have to do it for a while to be able to do it. Plus, you're like this all day, so at the end of the day, your back and your neck are junk.
And so you work at night at home. You have a studio in the house.
I do. One of the extra bedrooms is a studio. I've always just worked at home. I know a lot of people like renting studios. For me, the cost of doing that never really made sense because I've been fortunate to have, even if it was just a little space to work on stuff. I'd rather be at home. I'm very private. I like being by myself. A lot of studios, you're constantly around other people, and it's just I don't work like that.
Now we're going to see some still lifes, but do you, for the portraits, are you willing to work with a photograph, or you prefer to have people sit for you?
Both. With how incredible lenses and cameras are now, especially if you're using, say, a macro lens or something almost very clinical, it gives you more than, I shouldn't say more than the actual person being there, but the resolution on screens now is, you're really freezing things, and you can really pinpoint pores and hairs, and I mean, it's very surgical to a certain extent.
So these would appear then on the computer? These pictures that you would be willing to work from, they would have been sent. See, I don't really understand. This is like a magic box to me, so don't mind me. I don't know how to explain this.
Wizards in a cave make these things. I don't get them either.
But people would send you a photo on the JPEG, and then you would work from the computer, or would you blow it up, or what would you do?
It depends. if like someone had passed and they want sort of like I guess a commemorative, or for lack of a better word, that's one way. But ideally, it's nice to be able, for myself, to photograph the person. You know, you work
you to do the photo.
You work with a client and figure out what kind of pose, where the setting is.
You do the photography.
Correct.
Oh,
I mean, that's a huge part, just because even if you're working from life, there's a lot of information that I need in terms of lighting and planes to be able to make a well-rounded, physical representation of something on a flat surface. So a photograph that's not lit correctly, I mean, this gets very technical. But it's ideal especially if a client comes to you, that you both put your needs on the table and say, okay, this is what I want out of it.
Right,
okay, this is how I need to shoot this, or okay, well, I want to look. So you find that happy medium,
So they give up a little to you in terms of how that painting's going to look. According to what you've just said.
I think with any artistic endeavor, there's a bit of
that's
trust.
True. Yes, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
true.
it's not, you can check in as the progress of something goes on. I mean, also, if you're working from life too, they have the ability to actually witness the creation to a certain extent. So it can be swayed.
And then do people come in and to visit, to see it occasionally, if you're working from a photograph?
Yeah. I know, like, I paint my wife quite a bit. She's always poking her head in her if she's posing, or, I take a lot of pictures of her. So it's, just as an example, there's no set procedure necessarily, even though there's some sort of a semi-structure to how you go about doing it. Yeah.
Now, when you went to art school, was it just something that you loved, that you never intended to give up construction? Because you did the 4 years. What was it? You were at Mass College of Art.
Right. I did 2 years at Art Institute of Boston, which was affiliated with Leslie. That sort of got swallowed up, and now it's just fully with Leslie. Because they were always using Boston University buildings, essentially.
Right.
They're rented out, or however.
Is it still in the same place down there on Boylston?
Yeah, it was on Beacon, and then they had, at least the painting studio was sort of on that, it's technically Newberry, I believe, but it's sort of that back alley cut-off section of nobody really knows exists. Yeah. Right.
And don't they also do architecture there?
I believe so. I know Mass Art definitely does.
Okay.
But they have graphic design. I almost actually went for animation.
Really?
Yeah.
That's very technical. I mean, the thing that they do now with these, because they actually have people with lights. I mean, is there some way that they have actors?
Right. And a lot of green screen work and such. I like a lot of 30s. I watch a lot of 30s and 40s cinema.
I do too.
And you can actually see that in a lot of references in my paintings, even if it's not fully acknowledgeable to you as a viewer. it's not even that I need it to come through as that, but it's how the thing sort of gestates and moves forward. But I've always adored animation, and a lot of the Disney draftsmen from the 40s and the 50s. It
was fabulous.
Most people can't hold a candle to what they were able to do.
No, and it was so long ago. I know.
And it's all hand done, everything.
Yep.
The camera effects, everything was
I know,
nothing against
Fantasia and all
computers,
those things. Oh my goodness.
But what you could do was such, I don't want to say limited technology, because everyone's contemporary in their own time and on the forefront of whatever they're doing. But with that said, it's still not having as much as you do now. I still think it's light years ahead of a lot.
Why is that? That people didn't want to spend don't want to spend the time anymore that it took them? I mean, because with all the advances in technology, and yet the way those old films look, those old Disney films, Fantasia. I mean, you just don't see it. Why is that? Is it people can't be bothered? They don't revere the.
I think there's different arguments for cost. I think part of it is new technology always takes a hold of everything. I mean, if you go back 1400s, painters like Jan van Eyck, who I admire very much, not necessarily, it's not proven that he was using, lenses to get projections or do different things, but Vermeer or a lot of these people, they've sort of scientifically broke down that they were using things like this. So, like, why would someone as advanced as Vermeer or one of these other painters not utilize the best possible materials and techniques that were available to them, So I think that goes with anything. I mean, I use everything but the kitchen sink when I'm painting to get the effect that I want.
And what do you use for material? I was going to ask you that.
I paint strictly in oil.
Oh, you do?
I do. So
not many people do that anymore. Don't they go with acrylics because it's fast and it dries quickly and it's?
I think it goes both ways. There's a lot of people. There's a gentleman that I became friends with that's actually in the BP show as well. He makes incredible portraits, but they're all in acrylic. And when you look at them, you can't tell right away. I don't fully know his reasoning for doing it, but there's a lot of technicality to acrylic, which I just my brain doesn't work like that.
Is that right?
Like oil it naturally makes more sense to me.
No kid. Huh. But isn't the mixing the same? For example, to achieve a color, isn't it?
To a certain extent, and then
that's fascinating.
Not, because the vehicles that drive them are different. Oil, you have like a flaxseed or like a linseed or a walnut oil, whereas an acrylic is sort of a polymer dispersion.
Right.
So one dries very fast, one doesn't. One can be manipulated. You can force this one to manipulate, but I don't feel like it ever does.
Like oil.
Right.
My dad was an amateur painter, and he painted in the basement, and they didn't have really acrylics back then, and he.
Right.
So I want to ask some more questions, but let's look at this first one, and I thought it was a photograph. So it's really like a super realistic, and for you, what was how did you arrange the composition? You just.
This is just a shelf in my studio, so essentially. This was, I guess, for lack of a better word, a turning point for when I was painting a few years ago, because I was never really satisfied with what I'm still not, like anybody that paints, but that's a whole nother issue. But I wanted to have complete control over what I was doing. And then you never feel like you do. So I kind of threw away everything I was working on, I bought myself a little airbrush. So a lot of this is oil going through an airbrush.
Is that how you got this?
I didn't know much about airbrushing, but essentially airbrushing is really only meant for acrylics, because once the dispersion comes out, it dries instantly, so you can go over things. When you use oil, it wants to fisheye and do different things because oil takes days to dry. So I had to sort of re-understand how to use an airbrush in a way that it's not intended to be used, and I was able to get different effects. And
that was with the way you did the shadow here on the wall.
There's a lot of different effects that are going with it. So I'm still using brushes and traditional painting techniques, if you will, but this is the first time I felt like I was able to make something almost to the way that I had envisioned it from the beginning.
What year was this?
Well, this is probably within the last 4 to 5 years. Yeah, 4, 5, 6 years, somewhere in there.
Because when I looked, I said, what is he bringing this in?
I know. I just brought you a bunch of random
No, but I
photographs.
thought it was a photograph, honest to God. It was kind of foolish for me to think that, but I just, so, okay. Now this is your...
This is a little plaque
Yeah.
that, whenever you go to a
this is the
museum,
plaque
you
from
see...
from the...
Yeah, you see, in a museum, you see what is next to a work or...
he died before the painting was completed.
Yeah.
Huh. And there it is.
And that's the actual painting. That's about 12 by 16, so it's not a tiny painting, but it's not a large painting. The head's about, I would say, right about life size, maybe a shade over.
Now, what do you draw? Do you draw? This is on canvas?
This is on, linen. It's oil and linen.
And you draw first with charcoal or with...
I mean, it's always a little different. Pencil sketch may be something rough. It's crude.
On the canvas?
There's some lines that I need to get in there to sort of balance things out, but it's really, once paint or oil starts going on there, it's sort of wishy-washy and lost, and you're building towards, I guess, like the supreme image that you're trying to get to,
And what was it that they said was so extraordinary about this? That what was their...
Oh, they didn't say anything.
Didn't say anything. Oh. Huh.
It's too many people.
Well, 44, I mean, it's not...
No, the thing that's remarkable about it is I don't know any of these people. So you see shows like this and you see museums and you're like, how the hell do you get into a painting into a museum, at least while you're alive? Because that's pretty difficult. But, I entered it, and obviously someone in there saw something in it, because it has to go through that initial round. Then it has to go through, I'm sure, even within that initial round, they keep just whittling it down, because right off the bat, there's over 2,500 people. So you have to knock out a huge chunk just to get down. Let's say you get down to 500.
Right.
I don't know what they do.
Right.
And then from that, you get down to 200. So there's multiple stages where somebody must have liked it enough to push it forward. So very kind of them.
The time is really going quickly here. All right, so there you are with Sarah. Is it Sarah?
That's my wife, Sarah.
Sarah.
Yeah.
And this is the exhibit itself here.
Correct. And there's a lot of other, this is only maybe 15 paintings on this wall, and there's still another 30 or so more throughout the gallery space. But
this woman is holding a hot water bottle.
Yeah, he's a very talented young man from Italy. That's his grandmother.
Now, did you? Okay. Oh, so here's the. Here are the others as well. The one that won the prize. What made you? How did you interpret why that won? What was your? I don't know if I'm asking this very well, but what did you think of it? Were you surprised, not surprised, or did you?
Hell of a good painting. It's a remarkable painting.
It's not one of these.
No, I wish I had an image. If you go onto the National Portrait Gallery in London's website, you can see all the exhibitors. You can see the little blurb they have about everyone. So it's a good, you spend an hour on there going through the whole show. Because if you can't get to London, it's the next best thing to be able to see all these images, which is the nice thing about the internet. It makes, shows like this available to everyone. It's a combination of mark making. It's the posture of the painting. There's we don't have enough time to get into, but there's a lot of aspects and criteria, at least for me personally, that I look for in work.
And here's another one, and there's Marlene Dietrich.
Correct. The same studio shelf as the other one.
Yep.
Just finding interesting. That's an old flash from a Polaroid land camera from the 50s. That shot of Marlene Dietrich is actually from the ending of Shanghai Express.
I really love the old German movies. I don't speak German, but big fan of like M with Peter Lorre and. Oh, all right. Oh boy, there. So
this is a larger painting. This is about 2 feet by 4 feet. The studio shelf again. All the objects are life size, so it's very relatable in terms when you're in front of it.
How do you put together the composition?
That
Is it-
changes quite a bit. Essentially, this,
Was
you're going to
it
laugh, but I wanted to make sort of like a Halloween painting or like a carnival painting. So I know that probably sounds ludicrous, but the palm sander,
Yeah.
I had sort of an idea for like a Ferris wheel, with orange and black. I mean, it's
Yeah.
very, on the nose, but it's, I wanted
The rope.
that's an extension cord.
I know that, but I mean, might suggest rope
Right.
in terms of the
Right. But even the radio, I like the idea of this
The angle.
antenna, shooting through the middle of, it's the highest point in the thing, but you start to get this triangle and it really bounces you around, at least
Yep.
I think it
Yep,
does. And
yep.
the colors just naturally go, placing objects around, you kind of just instinctively know if something doesn't really work.
I used to do a lot of. Now this is obviously a self-portrait. There must be a lot of difficulty in
It's hard
the
being
objectivity of
neutral at looking at yourself. It's probably the hardest thing to actually. I hate it. It's miserable.
You don't like the way it's done.
No, I
you don't like painting.
It's not that I'm not happy with the
self-portrait.
painting, but painting a self-portrait is it's a miserable, god-awful task because you're staring yourself. It's a very selfish act. Let's be realistic. And who wants to?
Now, why did you do a self-portrait then? Did you feel like it was just a challenge that you wanted to meet?
It's the technique carrying over from the still life, essentially. It's a way to record myself as I age, which is, if you look at Rembrandt or anybody else, it's not a new concept. It's,
So you'll be doing
it's
other
nothing to
ones
really
then?
pull your hair out about. It's sort of just a painting that's going along with other paintings in the studio.
And what was the year? What year? How old is this one? When was that done?
Again, probably 5-6 years
Now,
ago.
will you do another one in terms of recording the aging process?
At some point, probably, yeah.
And this is pretty abstract. This is your
Right.
wife.
I have quite a few paintings
it's
at
very
home going
different.
on now that are much looser, more painterly, for lack of a better term. That's my wife
Yeah.
sleeping. I'm a creep, but
Well,
no, it's no. I adore my wife. You're just sitting on the couch at night. I always have a camera lying around. Just light hits a certain way. You get a glow off a TV, or it just sparks your interest in temperatures of skin. Or
so, is this the last one? I wanted to be sure. Was this the last one?
I believe so. Yeah.
So this is what I wanted to ask you. You just have about 5 minutes. So, do you think that you see things? Part of the gift is to see things differently than other people see them?
I would say I do, because most of the time on a job site, I say something and somebody goes, "What are you talking about?" So I hyper observe things. It's just I've always been like that. Even when I was little, I was like that. I didn't know that I wanted to make paintings or drawings or.
Do you feel like when you see something that you think that you move into a different type of viewing, as opposed to say just in everyday going around wherever you are? I mean,
I'm hypercritical of things. I don't like if I couldn't actually paint what I wanted to or things that interest me, I would have no interest in doing it. I just wouldn't at all.
Oh, right. But I meant, do you think when you get to that point where there is something that interests you, that you move into a different type of seeing than what you carry around with you?
Yeah, because I'm
go through
observing
every day?
things with sort of an agenda in mind, and how can I orchestrate, because you have to be selective when you're painting too. You're not painting every single thing that you see in the vista or whatever you're looking at.
And yet with your grandfather, it was so realistic. It looked as if you captured everything.
I've painted him so many times
Here he
over the
is.
years that I spent so much time with him ever since I was little. So I know his facial structure.
And this was a photograph.
Yes and no. So working from life from him, but then also there was oil studies. I've probably taken let's say 1,000 photographs of him, just with the intention of utilizing them for paintings. They're not, or you go apple picking, you have a photo of someone.
Right.
Like I said, when I shoot
Commemorative,
photographs,
yeah.
they're very, it's to see certain things, like how your cheek, changes, as the light turns against it, or, temperatures of the skin, or, where your hairline, there's things, that distinctly make you, you.
Now, I have to ask you a technical question, because I used to do some painting. I used to do drawing, and then I got kind of discouraged in high school because I think there were probably other kids that were getting lessons and so forth. And I just, so I knit because there's more control with that. But tell me something. When you have a large area of color, mm-hmm. do you have to mix it all up enough? Because what I could never do was match that color. Once I had put it down and I needed some more. I know this sounds so primitive, but so is that just a matter of your eye?
No, that's when the ADD kicks in. I just bounce all over the place. There's no system. Like I said, it's really what's needed to make the painting. I don't have a better, more. I mean, I went to school, different things. A lot of the stuff I learned, like how to do this. Most of it I've taught myself. I was fortunate to have a wonderful teacher when I was an undergrad, Amy Sudarsky, who's a very well-known, very accomplished painter. I feel very fortunate to have her as a friend and as a teacher when I was an undergrad, because it sort of set the foundation for being able to do a lot of this. But she can hand you like what you need to sort of get started, but you really have to be obsessive and just go to a museum, just look at books, and you really, to push something as far as you want, you really just have to do it over and over. And I know it sounds cliche and foolish, but you have to fail and just keep, scrape something down, do it, it's.
So to get back to the color, so I mean, I see this is a slightly, to the left of his face, slightly different color than up here at the corner, but when you start looking at it, you do see there's a but I that was always something that sort of bedeviled me, was mm-hmm. trying to reproduce a color that mm-hmm. I had already. But we're just about out of time. This has been so fascinating. I'm so glad you came. And
thank you.
And again, so if they want to see more of these, they would go to, where would they go? To the nationalportraitgallery.org or UK?
I feel foolish not exactly knowing the website, but it's the National Portrait Gallery in London.
So there'll be a website.
We have one in the States here in DC, but if you specifically look for the National Portrait Gallery in London, it's very easy.
And then it would be
up.
BP competition.
Correct. And then after that, it goes over to the National Portrait Gallery in Edinburgh, Scotland, and then it's going up to Belfast in Northern Ireland.
The exhibit?
Yes. So this painting won't be coming home till probably about this time next year.
Will it come to DC?
No. It's going to Scotland, then Ireland, and it's going to be shipped back home. So it's got a lot of traveling left to do. Well, I'm
just so pleased to have done this, because it's just been fascinating, and thank you. Thanks very much, and it's just brilliant. It really is. I'm really pleased to have had you.
Very kind of you.
And thanks for watching Norfolk Notables. My guest was Kyle Hooper, painter, and I'm Anne-Marie Battistone. This is NCTV.